Bill Clinton became president at a pretty young age. John F. Kennedy did. Others become president like Joe Biden at an older age. There is no right time in a lot of ways for hitting when you hit the pinnacle.
Financial independence.
Freedom.
Financial picture.
Independent financially.
Financial future.
Financial freedom and wealth.
Financial independence.
Get your fill. Financial independence and long life. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Get Your Fill, Financial Independence and Long Life, where we explore ways to achieve those two goals, and we invite really cool, interesting, and I think today we're going to say out-of-the-box people here to help us. Hugh Massie is the executive chairman and founder of DNA Behavior International, the behavior and money insights company. Now, behavior and money have a big correlation, but you don't always hear them. You don't always hear that recognized. He is, as a widely recognized Titan 100 CEO and behavioral solutions architect, Hugh helps growth-minded leaders create an exponential future by developing a 10 to the power of 9 quantum leap growth mindset, and by building a plan for over 1 billion people impact. With that framework, he addresses every opportunity and challenge through a behavioral lens. Cool. Hugh, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Christine.
So obviously, like in the back of our minds, we probably know that our mindset has a lot to do with our behavior, which has a lot to do with our success, which has a lot to do with how we are financially. But I'm not sure that most people are talking about that in like, hi, I can solve both your problems, or I can show you how that's going to happen. Can you just explain how things work for people who have not yet had the chance to go onto your website?
Yeah. So I think if we go back a couple of steps, it was probably important to sort of put the framework in place at DNA Behavior, and I think it's sort of it's reflected in our name. We are all about helping people uncover the core of who they are, and in particular, the focus is on a person's natural hardwired behavior that's set from very early in life. And, what we know now, but I think we probably intuitively knew when we first started doing this work 24 years ago, but what's much clearer now with, more corroborating research is that, while your DNA is somewhat set by the time, at conception, you get your genes, who you are is at the core shaped by the time you are 3 years old. So you imagine there's actually a lot of things that go on in your being, in your life, up to the age of 3 years old, and that shapes 85% or so of the core of who you are, and then that's wired in a little bit more by the time you're 7 years old. But why that's important is that your behavioral style that's wired in from your DNA and your early life experiences shapes your perspectives on life. It shapes your talents, how you wish to be communicated with, how you're going to show up in the world at the core. And under pressure, and this is why I got to this, is under pressure, that is where you're going to automatically revert back to. That's the instinctive behavior. Where you're going to go, unless you do a lot of work on your consciousness, developmental work to modify how you're going to show up in situations. But under pressure, it's very hard to, consciously think of, okay, I've got to actually do something different here, because pressure is pressure. And under stress. And I wanted to know that when I first started this journey, I was a wealth manager. I'd previous to that been an accountant. And I saw people say one thing in a more socialized setting, somewhat, if you want to call it what their learned behavior is or what their preference was, but under pressure, they do something different. And money was always involved. And I think that's where I got to see that the way in which people deal with money instinctively and in a learned behavior sense is inextricably tied to who they are. it goes together. So if you've got a life perspective that saving money is important, you had, that's the security of your life's important, the family life needs to be protected, you are going to instinctively make financial decisions that way. As opposed to if your perspectives on life are about growth, I want to take opportunities out there in the world, I want to have life experiences, I want to be powerful, maybe I've got a lot of goals to be achieved, mountains to conquer, your financial decision making is going to go that way. Now, there are other variations of that. Some people are very much about people and building communities. They're going to invest their money that way. Others are very much focused on, what do I have now? Counting every cent of it. I used to do that when I was younger and more of an accounting mentality. And there's merit to that in knowing, if you save the pennies today, then it's gonna grow into something more tomorrow. But that's limiting too. But I think what I'm trying to show you, Christine, is sort of through that how you deal with money fundamentally is inextricably tied to who you are. And another reason that I got to this is that money also causes stress for people. And not having enough obviously is a stress point, being able to pay the bills, meet cash flow needs if you've got a business, etc. But there comes a point where if you've got more than what you need, that creates another set of issues, and it affects your relationships, it affects how you show up in the world, the decisions you make, etc., etc. So hopefully I'm bringing out money is tied to who you are, and the more that you understand who you are, the better you're going to be able to fundamentally handle the mental side of money.
So in some ways, so you're saying that we're not like doomed by what happened to us from ages 0 to 3 or 0 to 7, that once we understand it, we can say, okay, hey, this is so, in my family, we didn't have a lot of money, and it was sort of, we romanticized that, right? So it's like, oh, it's cool to be struggling, and this is where the fun of life is and stuff like that. So we probably would have a tendency to always keep ourselves on that edge where there's never quite too much, right? You want to keep that romance and that excitement going.
I think that you raise a good point, that in sort of summarizing what I said, you are not doomed by your early life experience in terms of how you were wired as a human being. You can, if you are prepared to understand and accept how you are wired up, your talents, your attitudes, and belief systems that come with that, you can go out and do something about that out in the world, and you can modify your behavior. You are not locked into that. But having an awareness will help you grow and develop. But also, you are not, if you come from a wealthy or poor family, doesn't matter which, you're not locked into that either. How you deal with that is about your mindset and understanding your talents. And that, in fact, if you're born into a wealthier family where there's an abundance of money and you've had access to it in some way in how you've been brought up, that can be problematic too. And that can affect your growth as much as in life, mentally, as much as in some ways not having any and not having the opportunities to get the right education, to network with the right people and whatnot, is a problem. I think that, money, a lot of people look at money as a panacea of all problems. It's not, it's the creator of many.
Do you want to say more about that? Make sure everybody understands where you're coming from.
That it's the creator of many problems.
Well, because when you don't have enough, you think, oh, if only I had enough, then everything would be great. My spouse would be more loving, and we wouldn't have this stress in our relationship, and everything would be so joyful, and we'd be able to go on vacation.
So one way of and you use the word stress, but the one way of dealing with that, and perhaps it does come down to how people discuss money, but a lot of the time the stress with money is caused by people comparing themselves to somebody else. And a lot of, and I know there's entrepreneurs going to be listening to this, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that do that this person's got a higher revenue than me, this person started their business after me and is already at X millions of dollars turnover, they're making, you know, Y profits, or I think they're making Y profits, they're driving around in a great sports car, living in a great neighborhood, traveling first class. Everything must be great there. What am I doing? You know, what am I doing wrong? And that can be a great source of stress. And then they start moving house, or they start flying in a class of travel that they can't really afford. Money's getting spent. The spouse is onto that as well. And, you know, and then arguments come up, or there's suddenly a problem in the business. The same cash flow is not there that it was there last year. And, well, gee, we've got to keep up with the Joneses. That creates a whole set of problems. But also, you may not be understanding where that other person who appears to be successful came from, what head start they already had. Could be, in fact, the wife has got the money, or, you know, whatever else. There's so many variations there. And in a sense, you've got to concentrate on yourself. And how much money you've got, the turnover you have, isn't really the measure of success. I try to get people in a business sense to measure their success by something other than money, but it will come back there. We can't be, we are in business to make money at the end of the day, but I look at it, if you can measure your success by a human impact type factor or measurement stick that has a business model sitting behind it, you can be a lot happier. And there is no right time when you're going to be successful. You know, I was even reflecting on that last night, you know, listening to, you know, the Democratic convention. You know, I listened, and it's not saying what side I vote for, but I listened to all sides of this. But, you know, Bill Clinton became president at a pretty young age. John F. Kennedy did. Others become president, like Joe Biden, at an older age. You know, there is no right time in a lot of ways for hitting when you hit the pinnacle. I know a member of my family became very successful in his 60s. Somebody else did in their 30s. There is no right time. And I think that's really the point I'm trying to bring about on that side. But on the other side, when you don't have enough, you know, you can sit there and, you know, have the green eyes of envy of everybody else, but you can go out there and do something to improve your life if you want to go and do it.
And do you feel like you...
And in this country, in America, and I'm not from here, there are plenty of people who are prepared to help you and give you a chance, far more so, I think, than any other country.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, haven't tried to start a business in other countries, but there are certainly a lot of grants and, you know, consulting you know, like things like SCORE, where there are executives who know what they're doing and they want to help you for free. So, you know, there isn't really an excuse. You can walk into any library and find out how someone else did it. And
any library, now YouTube, technology makes things available. And guess what? You know, any sort of, you know, what I call sensible business person is always interested in an idea that could be made to work. And I think this country does give people opportunities. And so, you know, I know there are racial issues out there, but I don't think it really matters where you come from. You get a chance in this country, as opposed to other countries where it is more blocked, and the attitude and mindsets are different, particularly around entrepreneurship. So I think we all can do it. Then this is really around in our mind.
Yeah. So a person would go and I want to bring us to the fact that it's not just understanding yourself, right? Because you can apply this to other things, like who do you hire and who do you work with, and what kinds of other decisions that you might make by understanding yourself and potentially understanding the other person too. Is there?
Yeah, so I think that, you know, I think we're going to the more concrete place of this, that let's take it that you are a founder of a business, or potentially wanting to found a business, and there's you, there may be another person that you want to found the business with. I think that's a good idea, to have somebody potentially opposite to you. So one way, the way we would address that at DNA Behavior is that you would go in online and complete our assessment, business DNA, that's sitting there on our website, and get a good understanding of what your strengths and struggles are, where you're going to excel. I really am very big on helping people find what their X factor is. What's that activity where you can be a 10 out of 10 in the world, not 8 out of 10, and everything gets built from that. And then if you're bringing on a business partner, he or she do exactly the same thing, and where are you different, and how are you going to capitalize on those differences? Then the hiring for the rest of the team takes place from that. And you always want to be growing based on your X factor or unique gift. That's the way that you make yourself exponential. It's the way that you unlock growth in the business, because if every task is coming back to you, it doesn't work. And your energy is getting drained. Now, there's a little bit of that when you're starting a business, but at a certain point, you've got to get past that. But you've always got to know where you're going and what, in that way, so that you don't get yourself bogged down. And you show up the right way. So that a lot of what we are all about at DNA is helping you understand those inherent talents, because that's where you're going to be able to, if you want to call it, swim down the river, not up the river comfortably, where you're going to be able to excel. And that's the same for your business partners, other key people in the business, and then who you hire down the line. The thing the area that we've worked on recently around this in terms of leadership is that at the end of the day, as a leader of a company, particularly as the CEO, you do have a responsibility to make money for the company. And that's the fundamental bottom line. And so are you wired to do that? Are you wired to create financial value? And what we have done is come up with 6 metrics that we have proven create increased profitability in the company. So if the CEO, particularly, because the CEO has what I call the authority bias over what happens in the company, by and large, whether it's private or public, and a lot of the public companies, the board is looking to the CEO to drive action, even though in a lot of ways the board is actually legally responsible, but the CEO is usually on the board, and often in many cases the chairman, at least in this country.
Yeah. So
how the CEO is wired to create financial value is very important, and so is the key leadership team. And so we just actually recently did a study of the key executives, CEO and key executives of every S&P 500 company. And that's how we came up, and we were able to reconcile that to the profitability of those companies in their sectors. And that's where we were able to identify these traits. We're able, and it's interesting that in the sectors where there is higher profitability, including where AI is now expected to create more profitability, these 6 behavioral traits get stronger and stronger. And it's the same with entrepreneurs. We did research back in 2017, Christine, on and identified 5 entrepreneurial traits. The bigger the business gets, from $1 million going to 10 million, past $10 million, you got to have enough of these 5 traits, starting off with resilience. So that you put all that together, there's the entrepreneurial level of this, but there's also, as you're an entrepreneur and you start to run a bigger company, there are key traits that you've got to have. And it's true. It does line up against profitability. So, what I look at it and say is, got to be cut from the right cloth, and then behaviorally, but then how do you manage yourself in all of that? Okay, let's say all the leaders measure up to be right behaviorally, but if they're fighting with each other like cats and dogs, and it's animal kingdom inside the business, then it's not going to work. And that's where behavioral training is needed. And I was reflecting on a project that I did a long time ago before I had this level. We had the measurements of the behaviors, but we didn't have it linked to company profitability. But I worked with a very large consulting firm. It's listed on a stock exchange with its top 25 leaders, and 21 of them were what we would call the two money-making styles. And they had that style, but the issue they had was people culture inside the company. And that's why they called us in. And they were great at winning new clients, making tough decisions, the use of technology. They could draw in great people, but they couldn't retain the people, and they couldn't retain the clients. And ultimately, it gets down to the people culture was bad. But what was worse is they didn't want to invest in the people culture. And that's the problem. But it's one of the metrics that you've got to invest in that enough if you want your company to grow.
So will you share what those 6 traits are?
Yeah. So one is having a results drive. That increases. So the leadership team's got to be driven towards results. That's, in terms of making, fairly rational, logical decisions and setting some goals. The second one is having enough relationship engagement within the business. So that really is around the culture and investing in the culture. Now, what we do is we break down the results drive one into 3 more traits specific traits that need to be there, because there are people who've got a results drive overall, but then they don't have these 3 traits strong enough. And the first one is what we call a financial goal drive. That's the most important one. 5% behavioral increase in that one leads to 21% increase in profits.
Wow.
And that's all about building sales pipelines, having a long sales pipeline, being aggressive in the sales process. That's essentially how it maps out, or what it is. The second one coming behind that is the innovation focus. So is the company capable of innovating its products, creating new products with a high gross margin, and taking the risk on that innovation? Because if you want to grow for the long term, you can't just have one product. And in this day and age, product life cycles are shorter. Yeah. And if you want to have the long sales cycle, you've got to have products being filled up into those channels. So the innovation is important, but being prepared to back it. And that's where often some of these companies are run into trouble. And the third one is is fiscal control, is being able to manage costs. And too many companies spend too much on innovation, so they don't know how to innovate cost effectively, and then the overhead expenditure is too high, and they don't know how to manage that. And you see this particularly in cases where the executives have sort of what I call lived in the abundance land. They've been, they've worked in organizations in other parts of their career where everyone's traveled business class. There's huge offices, there's paintings on the wall, a lot of expense on events and things like that. That doesn't need to be there. None of that contributes to profitability.
Yeah.
And it becomes a culture. We've got to do that. You don't have to do that. And so they're 3 traits that need to be strong. The other one is more around governance, the ability to make prudent decisions. And so therefore, what's your decision-making process around making key high-stakes decisions for the company? And while you've got to chase growth in a lot of ways, you've also got to do it with some level of prudence and organizational structure. And I think that's where the boardroom's got to show up a lot more in these companies, to ensure the decision-making processes are being handled the right way. It's interesting, though, and you might say, well, that sort of financial prudence is a handbrake on growth. No, if it's done properly, it's fueling growth and it's ensuring the resources are directed to the right place with the right consideration. And it's not just a free-for-all of somebody that's chasing growth and is just flinging money up against the wall and hoping. Because that's really what we're talking about. And I think that, a lot of the time decision-making in companies gets dominated by an individual that either, knows how to manage that process for their benefit, and they don't get shut down and everybody else just conforms. Well, if Jim says that, it's a good idea. Let's go with it. And that's a problem. Or people get too anchored in something and you can't move them at all. That's the other part.
Well, and those two things are quite, I don't want to say rampant, but I would think it's quite common in entrepreneurial type of industry, right? Where one person or a couple of people started the business and they had to do everything they could do and they put every cent they could, and they just, threw caution to the wind in order to be able to start this thing. And that attitude still persists a bit, where it's like, well, who cares what it costs? This is what we need to do.
Yeah.
When at a certain point, that's not the healthiest decision.
Yeah, and that's where, having coaches can help, outside advisors, advisory board members to reel you in. And I'm in this boat. I'm one of these founders as well. That's been building a growing company and had to make these types of decisions and have to be reeled back in at varying times too. I'm right in the middle of it, right? So I understand, but I think it's I think my accounting background, the fact that I've invested in other businesses, successfully and unsuccessfully, been on boards and things also, all weighs into it. But also I have a team sitting around me, and I've learned I just can't upset them the whole time with something that's a new whim. Everybody's got to own the fact, certainly in the leadership team, whether something's working or not working, and be part of a success. And I think this is where building the right ownership plan inside the company can be very important, and sort of which encourages the right financial thinking, so that everybody's incentivized with profits getting made, whether that's every quarter, every year, and ultimately when the company gets sold, that you've got the right alignment. And that's from the CEO, founder, down to the person at the junior level.
Yeah. So how does this differ? It does perhaps feel to some people as we're talking that it is a personality profiling type thing. How does it differ from other sort of personality tests and, different types of ways of creating a group or understanding yourself?
Definitely, Christine, what we're, I make no bones about the fact that we're doing personality test, it's scientifically developed psychometrics, if you want to call it that. Mm-hmm. And the part where we measure the talents would be comparable to other talent-based assessments, whether it's StrengthsFinder, DISC, Myers-Briggs, and the like. Mm-hmm. The only thing is that, and I did this comparison study for a very large professional services firm the other day that are adopting us. And so we looked at 30 different instruments that they've used. And on the talent side, we measure a lot more items. So we're getting more specific in terms of the talents that get measured. DISC measures 4 items. Well, that's not the same as measuring 64, is it? Right. And so it's a matter of how much do you want to know. I think that's a big difference. The next difference, really, which sets us apart, and is why this organization has taken us on board, is because of the fact that we're measuring the leadership financial behaviors. We're measuring financial behaviors in a financial planning setting as well. So that's another whole dimension of our business, how people's level of money energy, are they a saver, spender, the behavioral biases. So we've got we're very deep on the money side. I think that's the part that sets us apart. But even if we're just used for the talent part and entrepreneurship, it's still very strong and it's differentiated. And then I think it's really around how our technology works in terms of we've got a lot of interactive apps inside our platform. So it's not just getting a static report. We're giving you more dynamic apps to work with, to use the information, to apply it in different settings. So yeah, the foundation of it is personality based, science validated psychometrics, but then it's what we measure on top and how we've proven that.
And how do you find the most successful companies are utilizing the information? Because I'm imagining, sitting around in a meeting with people, and even though I may understand, right, I may have their report and understand their DNA, that doesn't necessarily mean that I will always interact with them in the most effective way. Or, I mean, how do you recommend that companies use the data once they have it?
Yeah, so that's a good point. And one of the things that we really encourage is that the data which can be exported out of our system to CRM systems, for example. So if you're in sales, you can use it to understand the behavior of your clients, or if you're a financial planner. So every time that, let's say you're a financial planner, you want to log in and serve a client, or you're a coach, you can log in and see it there sitting beside other data and information that you want to use. So it can all come to a central place. We have our web app, so at any time, if you're a user of the system, at any time you can log in and say, okay, I'm part of a team and I'm interacting with Christine today. This is how I need to communicate with Christine and adapt. That is all sitting there to be used in that way. Or if you're a financial planner, you want to understand how somebody's feeling about the stock market today, you can have a look. There's what we call a market mood dial that's sitting there. So there's lots of apps. How do I need to work with this person? Okay, I'm a 36% style match. Means I'm relatively opposite. I'm going to need to adapt a lot. And potentially they will too, if this is going to work.
Yeah.
This is how we communicate. So all of those tools are there. They can be made interactive. They can filter through to, if you want to call it, other dashboards, platforms that a company has. So we're also trying to work on behavioralizing the data so that it is used in a meaningful way and not sitting there in an 80-page report.
And is it always a question? I'm just also imagining you've got this team already there. You can see that things aren't working, and then everybody sort of takes the test, and you realize, wow, everything would be a lot better if this one person wasn't on this team or whatever. Then should you be then saying, okay, you got to go, or we would all have to adapt to you, and that's not the best. I mean, are there actions that should be taken pretty much right away once people get the data?
Yeah, I think that the first thing is, the dream place would be okay, we've got a person on the team that's being perceived as awkward, might be taking up more energy of other team members than they should. The first thing to look at, though, is is that person in the right role, right? And to have a conversation with them about, okay, and let's say it's Mary, and say Mary, or it can be John. It's not, male, female dominant, but let's just take it that it's Mary, and she, the sense is that she's the duck out of water. Okay, you can say to her, well, Mary, you've completed the DNA assessment. This is your talents. How do you feel you're able to use your talents in the current role? Do you think there's a fit? What are you passionate about? You can have a very open discussion with that. And you might come to an agreement with Mary that she should be doing something else in the company or focus in a different area. Or, as often happens, Mary wasn't onboarded properly and doesn't know what's expected of her. And so in that sense maybe there's some element of mishiring. and mismanagement on the onboarding process, or in fact, it's the leader that doesn't know how to communicate and relate to her and has disenfranchised her in some way. So, we don't want to just rely on what the papers, what sort of the results say, from the analytics. Okay, this person's wrong, out they go.
Yeah.
That's not the right way of dealing with this. It may be an outcome, but usually the outcome for someone leaving is that they're not a values fit for the company. They haven't got the skills and capabilities to be working for the company. And yes, they may not innately have the right talents. If they are a person that's very gregarious, outgoing, a good talker, but very spontaneous, but they've been put into the accounting role, who's to blame for that? Or they've been hired into sales and they've talked the leg off a chair in the interview and they're very charming and you think, gee, this person knows everybody around town. But then you soon work out that they haven't got the competitive drive to close anything. They don't want to take rejection. They don't follow through. And all they do is good at having lunch with people. Well, that's another problem.
Right.
And so all these things get found out. But I think also what the assessment does is it helps you zero in on where should the questions be asked, what questions should be asked. It might confirm your intuition, or it might, in fact, just show out where some adjustment needs to be made. But the power of it is it levels the playing pitch. It can create the right conversation for everyone to buy into. This is what our strengths and struggles are, and what to do, as opposed to it all being happening intuitively. Or in fact, there's a coach or consultant standing in the middle, working with the CEO, saying, "Well, I think A, B, C, D should be done," but they don't really know.
Yeah,
that doesn't build a lot of trust either. And I think that our success formula with this, Christine, has been around building psychological safety. If you're the CEO and you want to lead organizational change and get the right teams in place, the right things happening, you got to complete the assessment. You got to be prepared to show it to everybody, and those around you need to follow suit. And it needs to become an open book on this stuff. At the moment that there's not trust with it, and that some people know, some people don't, some people aren't taking it. There's guessing games going on. There's consultants in the middle that can, cause harm around this too. That's a problem.
When people take you on, are they buying just the access to the to the software and the testing, or are you also giving them guidance and how to apply it and how to implement it?
Yeah, so we provide the core service in terms of the technology, the profiles as an annual subscription, so it can be sort of somewhat within bands, used as much as you want during the year and accessed by everybody on an unlimited basis. And depending on the organization, for the larger ones, they often have someone in training or a consultant there, coach, facilitator, that knows how to use it or gets trained on how to use it and deploy it. And then we're there more in the background to help that person out. Mm-hmm. And there are other cases where we would step in directly as the facilitator to help it get deployed, to work through a situation. I think it depends on what's happening and what the need is in terms of how involved we get and what our involvement is. So it can, but the system does not need us to be doing all of that in terms of interpreting it, because it's quite clear what it's saying. It's not in sort of what I call psycho gobbledygook type language. But for the reasons I described before, there are situations where it does need a good facilitator and to create the right organizational environment for this to be successful.
Do you feel like there's a sweet spot for the companies that are best suited to working with you? Is it like larger companies, or could any mom and pop sort of apply it and have that make sense for them?
Suitable for any company. I mean, we have from 5-person entrepreneurial startup or financial planning office to US government departments using it. It doesn't really matter. I think that in some ways, ideally, as opposed as a company, we would prefer to work with businesses that maybe have got more than 100 employees and clients to make the whole exercise more meaningful and to, make the time investment perhaps of the rollout better. So that's something that's important, that, where we've also marked out our differences in setting the system up, that it gets used by businesses with its clients to build a better client experience.
It sounds fascinating. I'm definitely going to go on and take the test for myself, just so I can.
Please.
I always strive to understand myself better. I took the Kobe assessment. I've taken them all, but the Kobe was like, I'm like a 10 quick start. So it's like, that's right. I loved starting things.
I know what that is.
Right. I love to start things, and then I get bored. So, but knowing that, right, understanding that, I laugh at myself sometimes. Like, yes, you like to start, but it's not going to be successful if you never finish, right? So,
yeah, and I think that's that what Colby provides there is a good starting point. But I think you want to know more than that in terms of how you relate to people, competitive drives, and things like that. That's not going to come. From there. That's not saying that Colby is bad in any way, but I think you want to know more dimensions.
Yeah, especially if you're looking at applying it. And, because you can know that and understand things about people, but if you really want to apply it systematically, like you say, you need the software, you need the really deep level understanding of what's going on and how people are going to react in different situations.
Yeah, and you need a mental commitment that understanding people is important, and then there's a lot to be gained by getting that part right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we're really bumping up against the time, but I would just like you to talk a little bit more about the 10 to the power of 9 mindset and how that sort of all applies here.
Yeah, so 10 to the power of 9 in a way is being exponential, and it's really talking about doubling your business every year, having a 10x mindset, that there is no inhibitor to your growth. It's about your mind. And what I say to people is, do the maths on 10 to the power of 9, it's $1 billion. I'm not saying that you have to set your business up to make $1 billion, but think about how can you have $1 billion impact, whether it's 1 billion people, it's 1 billion clicks on something, 1 billion something read, listened to, website hits, whatever it is. Start off with a big dream and then work backwards to, okay, how could you achieve that? Start small and finish big. And if you get to 1/10 of that, you're going to be way ahead.
Yeah. And it's true, because you can't, when you want to double something, you think, well, maybe I could do it myself. But when you start to think about raising it to the power of 9, then you're like, okay, I'm going to need systems. I'm going to need help. I'm going to need whatever.
And a completely,
mindset.
as we've learned, even at DNA Behavior, a completely different mindset about what clients are better, who do we partner with, who do we sell to, the ideal client, everything changes.
Yeah. What kind of skills are we going to need, right? Excellent. Hugh, thanks. This has been a real fun conversation. I've enjoyed it a lot. I hope you've enjoyed it a little too.
I did. Every time I do one of these podcasts with somebody, I get asked different questions. It's a great experience, and I think we really got into the core of what I do, and hopefully it's helpful for the audience.
Absolutely. And we're going to put all your contact details and everything in the show notes. But is there something that you wish I would have asked you that we haven't touched on, or something you want to make sure people take away?
I don't really think so. I think that what I always say, this is sort of probably antichrist for a lot of entrepreneurs, but be patient, follow the process, and don't try and overcook everything at the start for accelerated growth that either is not going to be there because of the market. Doesn't mean your idea is bad. There's a right time for everything, except there might be business plan A. It's got to get to business plan G before there's traction. So I think some level of patience and discipline is important for this, and ensure you're viable and be around for a long time. And ultimately, if you've got your purpose right and you're doing this for the right reason, success is going to come.
Excellent. That's beautiful. Thank you very much. And now how can people, if they want to take the test, if they want to reach out to you directly, if they have a big company, they want to hire you to come fix them?
Yeah, so if people want to learn more about me, you can go to LinkedIn. I'm the only Hugh Massie in Atlanta there under DNA Behavior. There's plenty on our website at dnabehavior.com where you can learn, more about DNA behavior, the research work we've done, practical applications, stories, etc. And on the homepage there is a link to start the DNA discovery. You can go in there and complete it. You'll get some feedback. It won't tell you everything that I've talked about today. That needs a conversation, but you can get started and sort of get the feel of it from there.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you, listener, for listening. I know you've been sitting here and you've been going, oh my God, this Hugh guy is so cool and interesting. And I've got to share this with at least 5 people I know. And that's exactly what we want you to do right now, because you need to blow somebody else's mind today. You need to get them to think out of the box and to imagine how their business could be better, and maybe 10 to the power of 9 better. So share this with them. They will thank you. And be sure to be here next week. Have a great one.